Welcome back. This is a series about stress and dealing with stress. And today we're going to look at problematic thoughts we have in stress situations and how to get them under control. As usual, please note that a video such as this is not a replacement for medical advice from your doctor. If you suffer from any issues, stress-related or otherwise, please make sure to seek medical advice. Alright. Now you all probably expect to see the small lion again, so let's get this over with. Here he is. You probably remember the story. A caveman takes a leisure stroll on the savannah and encounters a lion. Up to now, this seemed like a pretty straightforward story where the crisis is entirely from outside. However, we contribute way more to our stress experiences than we are aware of. One Richard Lazarus took an interest in that, and he developed an transactional model of stress and coping. So he understood stress as a transaction between ourselves and the problem we've encountered. How does this work? At the moment the caveman encounters the lion, an appraisal takes place in his brain. Well, there's a lion, what is that? Is it something good? Is it something I don't care about? Nah, I think it's a threat. How big a threat is it? And at that moment, a lot of the caveman's subjective point of view, his character, his thoughts, comes into play. Another caveman would probably have said, oh well, there's a rather relaxed lion lying in the grass, hasn't noticed me yet, not such a big deal. But our caveman is more fearful, he will say, there's a lion, I'm as good as dead. Next, there's also an appraisal of our caveman's own resources, of his coping capabilities. A buddy of our caveman might have said, oh well, he's a pretty good fighter, he's a decent archer, he's in a good physical condition, he will do fine. But our caveman probably has low self-esteem, so he's more likely to say, oh well, I'm not that good, and there was this hunt last month where I missed the gazelle, so yeah, I'm pretty useless, I can't do anything. So in the end, we have a pretty serious threat and we have coping capabilities, and between those we have a gap, and this gap is what actually triggers our stress experience. And since in this case it's a pretty big gap, there will be a pretty intense stress experience. Now our caveman probably exaggerated the threat and he underestimated his coping capabilities. In a more objective appraisal, the gap would probably be way smaller and the stress experience would be less intense. And obviously it works the same way for us. So how can we deal with that? Here we can use the third and final approach I'd like to present in this small series, mental stress management. The idea is that we become aware of the thoughts we have in a stressful situation, of problematic thoughts that make the situation worse, of stress enhancers, and we're trying to get those stress enhancers under control. Imagine you are on your way to an important business meeting in your car and suddenly the car breaks down. Now, the first reaction we'd have in such a situation would probably be, oh come on, this can't be happening. We're probably struggling with reality, we don't want to accept the facts, and we probably lose ourselves in anger and frustration. We are also likely to focus on negative things, on negative aspects in such a situation. This doesn't come as a surprise because something bad just happened, but we like to overdo it. For example, when we look at our coping capabilities, we might only see our weaknesses, our failures, and we might totally ignore our strengths and our achievements. This focus on negative aspects might also lead us to catastrophize, to greatly over-exaggerate the crisis and possible outcomes, like, oh no, I will miss the important meeting, my company will fire me, my partner will leave me, my life is basically over. Another thing we like to do is to personalize. Where we, for example, say, oh, my superior is in a really bad mood today. I wonder what I did wrong because it's certainly my fault. Or, my colleague didn't send me that file I asked for. Yeah, that's because he doesn't like me. I always knew. Similar issue is overgeneralization, where we are like, oh, I made a mistake. Yeah, that's typical, because I always make mistakes. I only make mistakes because I'm useless. Or in our example with a car, yeah, that's typical. All the bad things always happen to me. Another issue we are likely to encounter is that we get into a lone warrior mindset, where we object to any help, where we have trouble to ask for help, where we are like, oh, help is for weaklings, if you rely on others, you're lost. Obviously, we prevent ourselves from using social support here, and social support is a great weapon against stress, so we keep ourselves from dealing with the situation in a good and positive way. A similar issue is when we compulsively strive for harmony, when we think, oh, I must not disappoint my superior, I must not disappoint my colleague, everybody must like me, I must not upset anyone, I must not voice my own opinion or my own needs so I don't upset anyone, in a very compulsive and obsessive way. And a similar direction is perfectionism, where we think I must not make any mistakes, I must not fail, everything I start must be a success, and I must never give up. Here we also like to introduce slogans of perseverance, like I must stick to this till the end, and I must not make any breaks. And obviously again we keep ourselves from dealing with the situation in a good and positive way by first taking a break, calming down, and then approaching the problem with a clear mind. So how can we deal with those troublesome thoughts? How can we deal with those stress enhancers? Now, obviously, those are all thoughts that take place in our subconscious, thoughts that take place while we are in a kind of autopilot. No one will consciously say, oh well, I will first imagine the worst possible outcomes this situation can have. I think that will help. No, it's all stuff that takes place in an autopilot mode. So what we need to do first is get out of that autopilot mode and consciously take control of the situation. That isn't always easy. It can help you if during this small series you started to pay a bit more attention to stress and to more consciously notice stress, maybe notice how stress feels for you, how you personally experience stress. Maybe you have noticed physical reactions such as certain muscles getting tense, your hands getting sweaty or your hands getting shaky, maybe yourself getting nervous, things like that. And such indicators can help you to realize that you are in an immediate stressful situation. Or also if you noticed certain stimuli like grabbing a smoke when you're under stress or eating a chocolate bar, things like that, that can also help to become aware of the situation. Once you have consciously taken control, a good first step is to consciously accept the situation. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that you approve of it. It just means that you face the facts. In our car example, you might say, all right, my car broke down. I won't make it to the important meeting. Those are the facts. This is the situation I have to deal with, and that's the basis I have to act upon. And that already takes a lot of momentum out of this struggle with reality and out of this getting lost in negative thoughts and anger and frustration you might have in the situation. And that already puts you on a firm ground to get things under control. And next step, what you can try is to mentally take a step back and try to observe the situation as a neutral observer, to observe what goes on in your head, what thoughts you have, what emotions you have in that moment. Don't try to block or suppress anything, don't get lost in anything, just observe, try to notice which stress enhancers are active for you in that moment. And a good way to get those under control is to use reframing, to change your perspective. You might, for example, ask yourself, if I look back at this situation in a month or in a year, what will I think about it? Will I still view it as a catastrophe, or will I probably have entirely forgotten about it, because in the long run it's not that important? Or you could ask yourself, what are the important things in my life? You maybe have family and friends and your health, and one of many is work. And within work there are other things that are important for you, like being a good colleague, improving your skills and whatever. And in this whole big cosmos, this situation you are in right now is probably just a tiny speck and not that important. You could also try to imagine if there was unrelated third-party observer at the scene. What would how would he describe the situation? Would he see someone facing catastrophe, or would he merely see someone who is having a bit of everyday bad luck like we all encounter frequently? And all this can help you to put things into perspective and to get those negative and problematic thoughts under control. Now, obviously, if you have identified certain stress enhancers, you can also directly act against those. For example, if you noticed I'm deep in this focus on the negative things mode, in front of my inner eye, I see all my failures and all my weaknesses. Of course, you can try to consciously recall your strength and recall your achievements and focus on that to battle that stress enhancer. Dealing with a stressful experience is never easy. And even now you know how you can approach such a situation. It will probably take a while before it works out for you, before you are able to really apply the approach in an actual situation. You have to keep in mind those problematic thoughts and those stress enhancers. We probably developed those over the course of several years, so it might take a while to get them under control and to get rid of them. You will need some time and some patience. One more thing that can help you here is once you have identified certain stress enhancers, you can also try to act against them in your everyday life. Say you noticed you tend to be the lone wolf person who doesn't accept any help. In this case, you can try in your everyday life to consciously ask people for help, ask people for advice, to learn a new behavior that acts against this stress enhancer behavior. Or if you noticed you tend to get this focus on negative things, you could try to keep a small diary of things you enjoyed, of happy occurrences, of your achievements and of great performances you were able to deliver. So you learn to emphasize and to notice those good things in your life and your achievements. And of course, this will also help you in immediate stress situations to deal with those stress enhancers. Let me know in the comment section which stress enhancers you particularly noticed in your own stressful situations and how maybe you were able to get them under control. Maybe there are some interesting ideas for other viewers as well. We have reached the end of this small series about stress. Let me quickly summarize the approaches we've looked at. We started with instrumental stress management, where we tried to reduce the actual stress in our life, to remove stressors, to reduce our level of everyday stress to something we can deal with. Then we had a look at regenerative stress management, where we tried to use recreation and relaxation to balance out the stress in our life and to create a healthy balance. And there we also looked at how we can calm down in the face of a stressful situation. And finally, today we looked at mental stress management, where we try to identify and become aware of problematic thoughts we have in stressful situations and how to get those under control. I hope you enjoyed this little series. Thank you for sticking with me till the end. I hope some of the material is useful for you and maybe you can achieve a small change for the better in your own life. I will provide further videos about soft skill topics in this channel. Please subscribe if you would like a notification when new content is available. For today, I'll take my leave. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. See you next time.